What's going on, everyone, and welcome into Plizont's podcast, filled to the brim with glitchy analysis and freezing cold takes, so cold that they're boiling hot. This is the comeback, episode 57 after a 2-year hiatus. You know, we've been doing the long-form videos for forever, but I want to return to the moment where it all started, the reason that we began this. The actual podcast. Now, I'm going to be talking about the Buffalo Bills and their rebuild today. If you want to fast forward to that and skip all of the quote-unquote sappy stuff, feel free to skip ahead. It'll probably be like 5 or so minutes into this video. Now, let's continue and talk about why I'm bringing this back. Well, for starters, this is what I started doing. This is honestly where I find the most joy in doing my podcast in general, whether it's TikToks, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, or just long form video content. I like being able to come out with elaborate takes that have a lot of in-depth stuff. For example, I was doing the podcast, on a maybe bi-monthly basis when we first started. And I came out with the take back in 2023 that Davis Webb was going to be a head coaching candidate in just a few years' time. That's a 28-year-old, recently retired quarterback who became the quarterback's coach of the Broncos. And here we are. He might get a head coaching job by the end of this coaching cycle, which, in my opinion, is pretty spicy take for a few years ago. But what I enjoy the most is being able to sit down, study the game in a way that makes me happy, but also lets me share my thoughts and joy with the rest of the community that we've already grown. Over the Christmas holidays, the podcast really exploded. We got over 1,200 subscribers on YouTube. We have over 1,000 followers on TikTok now. That was out of nowhere. I'm going to always go back and firstly thank everyone who has been there for me so far through this unbelievable grind. For starters, my wife and my mom, my two biggest supporters by far. They give me the most feedback. They watch almost every single video that I drop as long as I let them know that I drop the videos. And even when I don't, they're still checking to make sure that they're not missing any of my stuff. They repost everything. They they comment on the different social media platforms. It's unbelievably inspiring to see two women in my life who love me more than life itself just continue to support me. I love both of you very much, and I am always thinking about how you're there for me, and it just, you have no idea how much it truly means. Next up, I want to get into probably my next biggest supporter. She might not even see this YouTube video, but I damn sure know if it was on an Instagram reel, she'd be seeing it, and that's Miss Patty Olson. I have yet to meet you, but I already know how wonderful of a woman you are. Guys, she literally likes, comments, and reposts almost every single thing that I do. She sends me awesome DMs. It's so nice to have people in my life that just continuously support me. I am so grateful for everything that you've done for me so far. And then last but certainly not least, I want to thank all my friends. It was my friend Korn that really inspired me to start this podcast. Quite frankly, guys, I was doing Plizont's podcast for the first maybe month and a half, completely out of spite, simply because I said that I was going to do it. And my friend Korn challenged me to say that I can't do it. And here we are now, 3 years later, and we're still on a grind here. But everybody else that I want to thank, Sonu, Ryan, Brett, Christian, Jax, Blake, Gooby, Brett, Hunter, Austin. These guys have been liking, commenting, chatting with me about all of my posts. And then recently, I also want to get into a few things that have been developing for me over the last few months. I'm trying to gain some more confidence in expanding my networking. First, I want to thank Colin Hatfield, probably the best interview that I've done just in terms of expanding ball knowledge in my mind. I feel like I know a lot of stats, I know a lot of players, I know a lot of history, but in terms of actually breaking down the game, Colin was so good at that when he was on my podcast just a few months ago. Go check out those couple of videos, actually. I want to thank Varun Shankar. He came on the podcast. He was my first ever interview, I believe, that I was published. Be sure to go check that out as well, guys. It was a phenomenal episode, to be honest. He is now the Houston Rockets beat reporter, I believe now. So congrats to him on the new job. And then last but certainly not least, um, Cameron and Carden, the Saturdays in the SEC guys. I've had them on several times, and there's nobody, in my opinion, that knows the SEC better than these two guys. They've come out with some great takes. I've had a few freezing cold takes while talking to them on both my podcast and theirs. But more than anything, what I'm talking about here, my friends, my family, my mutuals now in the podcasting space, we're trying to build a community of people that actively participate both on my podcast and I am on theirs as well. Not necessarily to like gain viewership, but to spread the love of the game. Like what I've appreciated about a lot of these interviews and comments and reposts that I've gotten is there's not really any, there's no backdoor agenda. Like it's just chatting with people, talking with them, asking them questions, answering their questions, just about what we love about the game of basketball, what seems interesting to us. Those things are the whole reason why I want to keep doing this. So let's talk about what 2026 is going to hold. I've spent basically the whole month of January thinking about this. Obviously, we're going to be putting together some engaging content. I want people to be able to follow along this journey. I need to do as much as humanly possible in terms of posting. If you are out there trying to start posting or commenting yourself, the top 3 things that you can do are post a lot, be consistent, and then find other people that want to do this with you and or just people to participate in your community. Those are the 3 things that I've learned, and I'm going to try to capitalize on that going forward into 2026. So let's talk about a few things that I'm going to do. First, I'm going to try to do. I mean, everybody says that they're going to do this and going to do that. You can only really try. I mean, the Star Wars saying from Master Yoda is, you either do or do not. There is no try. I'm telling you, I'm going to try. Okay. There's no promises that I can make. I'm going to do my absolute best to come out with at least bi-weekly shows like this. We're still going to be doing the long form YouTube video content. I'm going to try to do as many TikToks, Instagram Reels, and YouTube Shorts as possible. I want to do some Q&As. I need to do a lot more interviews and collabs. Those are by far the most fun things that I do on this channel, as well as the most entertaining content, quite frankly, because, I'm going to do this for the next 30, 45 minutes. And, a lot of people like me, but I don't know if a lot of people want to hear me yap for 30, 45 minutes. Maybe have some other people on this as well. But holistically, the whole reason we're doing this, it doesn't matter about follows and subs. Likes and comments do matter to me, not because I want, my record high, but because I want to know that people watch this content and A, enjoy it, and B, feel like they can engage in it and have a back and forth conversation with me. All the hate comments out there that I've gotten, I don't really mind them at all. I actually appreciate them. It boosts the engagement, but more than that, it also just proves to me that there are people out there that want to watch my stuff and at least hate comment on it. Whenever I get a good comment, I'm really happy about that. But that being said, let's get into it. This is the start of our episode today. We're going to be talking about the Buffalo Bills and what they've been doing over this offseason. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Lets me know that you guys care to watch more of this content and that you want to see more of this. So let's hop right into it. For starters, the Buffalo Bills fired Sean McDermott after a horrible overtime loss against the Denver Broncos in what is it, the Mile High Stadium, I guess, out there in Denver. It was a brutal loss, to say the least. Kind of brings up the vibes of the curse in Buffalo. They went to the 4 straight Super Bowls in the 90s, and they lost all 4 of them. I kind of feel the same vibes here from Josh Allen in this organization. It seems like they get these awesome playoff performances, like the 30-something points they scored against Kansas City, but still lost that game. Every time I think of the Buffalo Bills in the playoffs, I just think of seeing Stephon Diggs out there watching Kansas City celebrate going to the Super Bowl just a few years ago. It seems like that is the generic vibe there in Buffalo. Josh Allen was absolutely distraught after that game in Denver. He had several turnovers in that game, but I don't think anybody in the Buffalo organization or the Buffalo fan base would put this loss on him. A lot of people want to blame the interception call that was on the field against Brandon Cooks. There were a few penalties that shouldn't have been penalties, but the way that I look at it is the Buffalo Bills did not play a good enough games to not let the refs decide it for them. I completely agree with Buffalo fans. That was not an interception. That was a catch. If anything, it should have been ruled. I think it was. Was it ruled a catch on the field? It's hard for me to believe that there was quote unquote indisputable evidence to overturn the call. I think it should have just had the call stand at the moment in time. The vibes, or not the vibes, but the air in Denver there was completely stale. The momentum had been captured by Buffalo, and then to do that at that point in time is just an absolute gut punch to the Bills. And you saw it on every one of those players and coaches' faces at the end of the day. Sean McDermott basically gets fired for this game. Now, the ownership was talking about, it was a week-to-week thing, and Sean McDermott might have been fired if they had lost the AFC Championship game. I just find that hard to believe. The Bills have been the 5 seed, the 2 seed, the 3 seed, basically every single season that the Sean McDermott regime has been in power. They are an unbelievably they're a great run organization from top to bottom, but they decide to move on. I think it might be for the best, but we're going to talk about that first. So Sean McDermott, apparently, rumors have it that he was blaming the roster construction on why the Bills were struggling. I look at every single statistic, and I'm going to get into what the Bills really struggled with later on in this episode, but Sean McDermott was blaming the roster construction. Apparently, Bills ownership did not like that. They promoted Brandon Beane, the GM, to both the GM and the president of football operations going forward. And in my opinion, it really wasn't that bad of a call. I think Brandon Beane is a very good GM. Now, is he Howie Roseman with the Eagles? Absolutely not. But in terms of talent evaluation, he does a tremendous job at putting together good drafts. So this is first what I want to talk about. Let's talk about his draft picks. He came in the 2017 year, and let's just look at all of his first and second round picks from the last 9 drafts. So let's start with Trey White in the 2017 draft, Deion Dawkins. Those were 2 of his picks. And then he drafted Zay Jones, which he's still a player in the NFL, right? I wouldn't call that a hit in terms of draft picks, but to draft a player, the average lifespan is about 3 years. For a first round pick, it's around 5. I think Zay Jones was a second round pick, and he's been in the NFL now. This is going to be year 9 for him. So that's a really decent draft pick, but I will not call it a hit just because he ended up leaving very early on. But next up in 2018, the top 2 round draft picks were Josh Allen and Tremaine Edmonds. Both extremely solid players, but Josh Allen, an MVP, a literal MVP, and an MVP candidate for multiple seasons. In 2019, they had Ed Oliver and Cody Ford. Now, Ed Oliver never reached that peak level of potential that a lot of people thought that he had. I don't think I'm really going to blame, Brandon Beane for that. I might actually blame Sean McDermott for the lack of development there, but Cody Ford as well, I would not call a miss. Now, he didn't spend a ton of time in Buffalo, spent a good amount of time in Cincinnati. He has gotten some good run there, coming from a backup to becoming a starter with some injuries this season. I think we could absolutely see him continue being a starting lineup. He's a little bit higher to me than Zay Jones for Buffalo as a draft pick. I would count that as a hit. Then AJ Espinoza, he once again, like Ed Oliver, was not a superstar draft pick that Brandon Beane had, but he was still a very solid one. Now we get into 2021. You got Greg Rousseau. Once again, the story is that Brandon Beane drafts good starters. And, Greg Rousseau is one of those guys. He also got Boogie Bashan. This was really the first outright miss. I really don't even know who that guy is. No offense to him at all. I just have never heard him make his mark in Buffalo. Now in 2022, you got Khair Elam, I believe is how you pronounce his name. Once again, very similar to Boogie. I haven't really heard of that guy, But James Cook was in that draft. Next, you got Dalton Kincaid in the 2023 draft and Osiris Torrance. Both of these guys, I mean, Dalton Kincaid is a top 10 tight end in the league, and Osiris Torrance is a good starter on the offensive line. And this was an offensive line that was number 1 in the league in rushing this year. Now, 2024, this is where the controversy hits. He drafted Keon Coleman and Cole Bishop. Now, Cole Bishop's been a pretty solid starter for the Bills this season, but Keon Coleman has struggled with some major discipline issues. Apparently, he's been showing up late to meetings. Doesn't seem like he has a lot of care in the world for playing football. Now, on the back end, though, Pergula, who is the owner of the Buffalo Bills, came out and said that Brandon Beane was not the guy who really wanted Keon Coleman. But I go back and I look at some of these clips that they're pulling of Brandon Beane basically outright talking about, man, I hope Keon doesn't really run that well in the 40 because we want to be able to draft him. Very strange to me how a guy who is sitting there by himself is quietly talking about how he wants to draft Keon Coleman that badly at the combine. It's not like this was right before the draft. This was at the combine. I don't think coaches really give that much input before you get there because that's when a lot of coaches begin the scouting cycle in person. So very questionable rumors going around about that situation. But moving on, 2025, Maxwell Hairston ended up coming back from injury. I thought he played great. TJ Sanders has been a good fill-in role guy. He might step up and be a starter in just a couple seasons. Very similar to Espinoza at Oliver. And, oh goodness, I'm thinking of one more guy off the top of my head that played for the Bills back in like 2017. He was a Pro Bowl caliber player. Kind of a Bills legend, a white guy with a beard, very, very thick defensive tackle, but I digress. I think that this Bills team is well constructed. They just are missing a few pieces, but the draft is not the problem. Let me list off some other guys, some gems: Matt Milano, Harrison Phillips, Khalil Shakir, Dawson Knox, Gabe Davis, DeMar Hamlin, Taron Johnson, Wyatt Teller. These were all guys drafted by Brandon Beane in the later rounds of the draft. So they have plenty of talent coming in through there. And then looking at the trade aspects of things, Beane has been unbelievably aggressive in the draft. He's traded up to get Josh Allen, to get James Cook, to get Tremaine Edmonds. He's done a really good job of attacking the draft, finding the value that he needs at some of these high-end picks. But then last but certainly not least, he's the one who traded for Stephon Diggs. Now, the pick that they traded away ended up being Justin Jefferson, and you'd love to have that pick back, but those are hypotheticals. You know, the Bills, if they kept that pick, were they going to draft Justin Jefferson? Would Justin Jefferson even have fallen to them at the same pick? All of these are like the butterfly effect. We cannot deal in hypotheticals. The Bills just don't have a lot of trade value in terms of market. Who wants to go play in Buffalo? There's not a lot of people. Even with Josh Allen being there, what big-time wide receiver free agent has said, I want to go to Buffalo? None of them. And I doubt that I doubt that many of them will continue to have that same mentality. It's freezing cold. When the weather gets that cold, you don't pass the football nearly as much. Look at Stephon Diggs' numbers in the beginning of September, October, and even into November up there in Buffalo versus what his numbers were in December and January. The game of football changes as you get into the colder months. A lot of wide receivers like playing down south. Mike Evans has thrived in the Tampa Bay climate for years and years and years. That's what wide receivers want to do. So it's hard to find trades, and it's also hard to find free agents. Now, when the Bills began their Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott regime, they were actually pretty aggressive in finding good free agents. Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, Mitch Morse, all were free agent signings that became Pro Bowlers with Buffalo. Those are sharp finds. Those weren't premium talent guys that they were signing. Once again, playing into my point that big-time stars don't want to come play in Buffalo. The one guy that they did get was Von Miller, and that was just an injury-ridden catastrophe. Obviously, Von Miller, after he left Denver, fell out of his prime. He still, produces at a pretty good rate, but you'll never see Von Miller be back to that 15, 16 sack a season type guy, Super Bowl MVP type guy. That was, what was that, 10 years ago now? So, signing him to that massive contract was the major flub of this organization so far. Like I said, he's not moving like Howie Roseman. He's not finding, sharp plays where the entire league is just sitting there saying, wow, what a trade. I can't believe the Buffalo Bills fleeced somebody again. But he is a sharp talent evaluator, both through free agency and through the draft. But the thing is he has to find value. It's not like they're picking out premier guys. Like I said, they're finding guys who want to get in there and grind. James Cook is a grinder. He's not an explosive back in terms of, making the plays with his legs. He is a guy that you've got to get 15 to 20 carries, and once he's in that rhythm, he's almost unstoppable. Josh Allen, as explosive as he can be, is more of a rhythmic player. Those rushes that he has, they're not, wheelhouse rushes like Lamar Jackson. They're powerful, they're gritty, they're physical. And then, of course, the passing game, he throws a great deep ball, but that intermediate game that he had with Stephon Diggs and now that he has with Khalil Shakir, that is Josh Allen's bread and butter. So offensively, things are going great. The Bills were in the top 10 of almost every major offensive statistical category. Situationally, I thought that they were pretty good throughout the season, and a lot of that goes to the thanks of Joe Brady, who they've just hired as the head coach. Under Joe Brady, Josh Allen's numbers haven't necessarily been the peak of his career, but efficiency-wise, he's unbelievable. In the last 3 seasons, I believe he has over 35 rushing touchdowns. Combine that with, I think, close to 80 passing touchdowns. Really impressive stuff from a quarterback that early on had a lot of turnovers and a low completion percentage. Josh Allen is now so unbelievably comfortable in those gimme throws, which there were a lot of questions after year 1 on whether or not he could be a starter in the league consistently. Obviously, those conversations have fallen by the wayside now, and a lot of that is thanks to Brian Daboll, Joe Brady. Joe Brady is really the one who has elevated Josh Allen's career into MVP, serious MVP talks. So shout out to Josh Allen and really shout out to Joe Brady. I don't know if this was the absolute best decision that the Bills could make, but I have been harping on it for years. The best coaching hire that you can make holistically is a young, offensive-minded coach that is accelerating the offense from either your own team or someone else's team. Joe Brady has done that in multiple spots, but specifically with Buffalo, to keep him around is probably the right thing to do. I don't know if Joe Brady was a serious coaching candidate for other jobs in the league, but I am glad to see that he ended up with this job here in Buffalo simply because of the fact that I love the pairing that him and Josh Allen have. Now, moving into next season, I'm not going to talk about free agent signings, the draft, or anything like that. I'm simply looking at what went wrong with the Bills this past season and why they didn't make it to the Super Bowl. Like I said, offensively, production was through the roof. Defensively, they still were not bad, despite all of these talks and rumors about their defense is horrific. I think they have great secondary players. They have a very solid front seven. The one thing that they could not do defensively, statistically speaking, and situationally speaking, was stop teams on third down. Now, the Bills were still first in the league in time of possession. So it's not like we're talking about the Buffalo Bills not being able to stop the football or not run the football themselves. They were able to pound the rock. They were the number 1 rushing team in the league. What I am talking about, though, is that situationally, those third down conversions were a death sentence for the Bills. They were 25th in the league in allowing third downs on defense. Specifically, talk about the nail in the coffin. Look at the Broncos' 2 drives right before overtime in the fourth quarter and right before halftime in the second quarter. Multiple third down spots, 5 of them. How many did they convert in those 2 situations? All 5 of them. And those 2 drives led to 2 touchdowns, which obviously is the difference in the game, more than the difference in the game. But it's also just a gut punch to your team before halftime and before overtime. Mistakes are always high after those because you're trying to really put your stamp on it and make the play. Buffalo gets the ball back before halftime. Josh Allen fumbles on the first play. And then just 2 series later, after the fourth quarter touchdown drive, Josh Allen, tries to go deep and it does not work out, ends up being an interception. Controversial calls all throughout the game, but you really have to put this loss on the situational third down losses. And quite frankly, I think the blame of that goes to Sean McDermott. He's the play caller for the defense. He constructs and puts this scheme together defensively. And third downs didn't play well in the Bills' favor this year. That was the deciding factor in whether or not they went to the AFC Championship game. It was the deciding factor on the Patriots game earlier this year at home in Buffalo, 23-20. Really disappointing, but the vibes are still high in Buffalo. Josh Allen, Khalil Shakir, James Cook, this offensive line, Joe Brady, a lot of young budding stars on the defense, and a decent amount of not actual cap room, but situational cap room to restructure and try to go out and get a splash free agent signing. It's clear that the Buffalo Bills are wanting to move on from Keon Coleman. They need another wide receiver. I think their tight ends are great. That all being said, I love what they're doing so far. A lot of people have given them a lot of heat for elevating Brandon Beane. I think it's fine to elevate him and promote him into the president of football operations. Now the heat is on, right? The leash is short. The heat is on. All of what's going on in Buffalo is at the hands of Brandon Beane and Joe Brady. Let them cook and see what happens. But that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you guys so much for watching. Once again, click that like, comment, and subscribe button, and we will see you next time.